Time, and I want to talk about spiritual failure. Sounds very serious, but I want to talk about it to help alleviate the shame and guilt and all of that energy that can come when we are using our spirituality as a way to measure our worth, right? And I want to share it because this is deeply personal to me. So I started the Institute like 11 and a bit years ago, and we came out of the gates firing. For years, the momentum was so rapid, so intense. We grew exponentially. We became, a global institute really, really fast. And it was intoxicating. It was incredible. And I was so grateful. And I hadn't realized that I had entirely wrapped my sense of self-worth up in the success of the institute. So what I mean by that is I had at some point made this subconscious belief come to life, which was this was me being rewarded. Like I was being patted on the head by God. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And the business success was a measure of that, right? So what happened when the Institute started to not be as successful? Which happened? It had happened back in 2022. So COVID years, and a lot of businesses were suffering as a result of this global pandemic, and I am not alone in that. But perhaps what made my particular brand of suffering unique, or at least, unique to those of us who had associated our worth with our business success, was that exactly. That I believed that when the Institute started to not work, and by that I mean the money, the students, all of that rapid growth that we'd experienced in the first 7 years just seemed to dry up, I made it about me. I made it about my sense of no longer being rewarded by that divine consciousness, that I had done something wrong, that I had gone astray, and basically this was retribution or some kind of punishment, which is a really twisted idea to have to carry around in your head. And so of course it had to happen, right? I couldn't continue being successful in the work that was all about connecting women, I just kicked my camera, to their self-worth when I was not being the embodiment of that. In the Institute, we talk about this as congruence. I was incongruent with what I was saying and the way I was living. And I hadn't even realized this sneaky little effer had come into my subconscious until I nearly lost it all. So we are now many years past that, or enough years for me to feel safe and comfortable. But there was a brilliant opportunity in this for me when I was willing to get humble, which, by the way, took me some time, right? It took me a good number of months, possibly even years, to fully integrate the opportunity in this, which was to untangle my spiritual self-esteem from my worldly success, right? Was I less worthy because the Institute went through a period of time where there was zero growth, where we were not making the money that we'd used to make, where the students were not arriving, knowing that it was COVID times and many, many businesses were impacted. But that reason alone was not offsetting my sense of shame that somehow I was being punished or, something by God. God had withdrawn God's approval. And this again is another massive betrayal of what I teach, which is I am that. I am God, right? I am one with the quantum mind. I am one with all. God is not external. Therefore, if there was any kind of punishment, it was punishment that I was enacting upon myself. Right? So in this period of disassembling, of decomposing, of letting go of the BS that somehow my material success was a measure of how rewarded I was by God or not, I had to meet my own demons, my own shadow programs operating in my subconscious to reclaim my self-worth from that horrible web of entanglement that said I was only honored, loved, granted this success by something external to myself, and instead reclaim my inner authority. And yes, I do believe that what we experienced at the Institute at that time was both an invitation to get honest with myself, to meet my shadow programs and to course correct, but also a way for me to be able to go forward embodying what I say. not just paying lip service to it. So nearly losing it all was the greatest blessing of my life, because by the time I got through that probably 18-month initiation, I had fully surrendered any idea that my worth was tied to how many students I had or how much money was coming into the institute. And I could see my worth as something that was not being measured by that very egoic metric. There is no part of me that needed that success to know that I was worthy. And yet there I was, being all tied up and being pretty self-destructive in the process. So life brought me to my knees, and it was the greatest opportunity, the greatest blessing. But not at the time. At the time, it completely sucked. And I had to go through that death process, if you like, to let that part of me go that was so caught up in this idea that I was either being rewarded or punished by God. And as a person who teaches that I am God, knowing that the person or the energy doing the rewarding or punishing was me was a pretty heavy burden, but also a space of great personal responsibility and therefore great power, right? That reclamation of my own power came through nearly losing it all. The other part about this that was so powerful for me was the recognition that when we are in service, when we build a business that is part of our spirituality, that is a representation of our soul in the world, we have to work with a whole different set of ideas of success. We are absolutely entitled to worldly success, to having lots of students or clients, of making money, because if we have none of those things, then we're not getting to have an impact, right? And I want to increase my impact and have the biggest possible influence that I can. And being in survival, being in poverty does not allow for that, right? If I have no students, then I'm not helping anyone shift from their own fear programs into their intuitive intelligence. So there was so much richness in me being brought to my knees and coming out the other side of it. And I could only come out the other side of it when I was willing to fully surrender my creation, the Institute, to that divine part of myself, to that God part of myself, and say, whatever you want, whatever it is that is the highest dharma for me, I am willing to humbly go there now. I let go of my agenda. I let go of my ideals. And what came out of that was an almost instant change. And I mean instant after 18 months of sweating, crying, snotting, a lot of bodily fluids, to get to the point where I could be truly the embodiment of what I teach. And that is that I am that. I am the God consciousness that I am seeking. There is no separation. And anything that is showing up in my life is there in service of my remembrance of that. So by nearly losing it all and then surrendering it, coming out the other side, and now being in that place of thriving once more, I was able to show up in this new energy that was truly aligned with what I said. We as spiritual entrepreneurs don't get away with the BS, right? We cannot say one thing and do another. We have to be entirely congruent, and our service is our medicine. We aren't doing this work in an abstract way of like, that's a nice idea. I'll just think I'll run a course on that. The work that we offer that really changes people's lives is the work that has changed our lives, right? So this is a really big tip if you are in that path or commencing it or thinking about doing it, is your service is your medicine. So whatever it is that you want to offer needs to be alive in you. It needs to have real traction in you. It has to have altered you. Otherwise, how can we share it? And it doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean we're at the top of the mountain. I often have reflected back to me that one of the things that people value is that I'm real. I don't hide the fact that we had a thriving institute and then I nearly lost it, and then we came back again and I went through a dark night and I battled addictions, because what is the point in me trying to pretend that I have all of it together? The spiritual path of awakening is a path of undoing. It is a path of unmaking ourselves, and it's messy and it's not linear and it's not always going to be presentable in a way that's neatly packaged up with a bow. It is a path of paradox, and the more we make ourselves comfortable with that, the more that we can do the deep work without shame, without guilt, and without lying to ourselves or anyone else out there. So we are measuring our metric of measurement is very different to someone who is running a business that isn't based on putting their soul out into the world. And we need to pay attention to that, because if we are simply operating as a muggle would operate, God bless them, then we are missing the deeper truth of our work, which is we are the first recipients, and we must be willing to try and often fail to be the embodiment of what we offer, and showing up to that, not hiding from that, is a really big part of the medicine that we offer. I am not interested in people presenting these shiny, perfect ideals of what the spiritual path looks like. It is messy. It is dirty. It is sweaty. It is snotty. It comes with a whole bunch of deprogramming. And that is work that we must be willing to do in order to show up and meet our authentic self, which is that I am divine consciousness. But to get to that place, there's a lot of shedding. There's a lot of letting go. And it doesn't have to take long, and it doesn't have to be painful when we correct our perception of what the spiritual path is meant to be. It is not unicorns and rainbows and glitter. It is not spiritual bypassing. It is not wrapping everything up with a key takeaway, right? This is a path of paradox. It is a path of constant movement towards growth. So we're never in the comfort zone, and we are always going to be evolving if we're doing our job right. And I want to share that because I really hit a wall hard when I was, in a way, performing rather than embodying. And that was a hard lesson to learn, but it saved my life in so many ways. And I don't regret any of it, even though it was so devastating at the time. I needed that kind of intervention because I was blind to my own patterns around it. But we can go more willingly and more lovingly towards the truth. And that is certainly my choice now, right? I'm like, great, I learned that. Let's make the rest of the lessons a little easier. And yeah, I know I'm not in charge of that, except my willingness to be honest, to be transparent with myself, to not bullshit you, to not bullshit myself, right? And to do that, I have to have the courage to know that I am worthy, regardless of whether I am imperfect, if I'm getting it wrong, if I perceive myself as failing. It is still all of the divine. Nothing is not of the divine. And even though that can be really hard to see from our current level of perception inside of this dream of life, it remains the truth. So I'm here to say, fail harder, enjoy the process. Let's withdraw our need for external approval from an external idea of God or anybody else, and show up as spiritual leaders without trying to make everything bite-sized, easy to understand, and tangible. It is not simple, but it is worth it. Have the most beautiful day.